I'm Richard Dowden. I'm director of the Royal African Society. I've been a journalist covering Africa for a long time, more than 20 years.
I'm Roddy McKean. I'm a partner at Wentzel, which is one of the largest law firms based on the continent. I head up our Africa practice and so spend a lot of my time traveling around the continent. So Richard, should we kick off and just talk about some of your observations about how Africa is changing at the moment and the trends that you see?
Well, I don't want to go on too long, but going right back to independence, Africa was seen as the hopeful continent. This was the future in the 60s, and it was Asia that was the hopeless continent that had too many people and poverty and so on. And I think primarily because of the politics of Africa. There's something like 2,000 languages, between 6 and 10,000 political units suddenly forced at the beginning of the 20th century into what are now 54 countries, with the people themselves having no part in it whatever. The lines were just drawn. You're there, this is Nigeria, that's Ghana, that's Kenya. It's hardly surprising that the politics didn't work terribly well when they suddenly became democratic. So huge competition. And then they suffered because of the Cold War, that the East and West just backed leaders, dictators, to keep those countries there. And then at the end of it, they were just thrown to the wolves in the sense of, oh, your economy's all over the place, you've got to privatize, and they were handed over to just have all their state industries privatized, their currencies collapsed, and you went into this terrible period of the 90s when the politics also exploded again. And it was only about 2000 when China decided to source its raw materials in Africa, and mobile phones arrived, and a new African middle class started to emerge, that it began to turn around. And as I always felt, when it did turn around, it really began to move quite fast.
Yeah, and which we're obviously seeing now as from the GDP figures for a lot of the countries outside South Africa, because of course South Africa is a very different situation. But the sort of urbanization rates are increasing, as you say. The middle class is growing. Just more people have disposable income. Everyone talks about the consumer story as being the key to Africa's future. I mean, how do you see that panning out?
Well, yes, I think that growing middle class is going to drive Africa's growth, apart from the raw materials. What I've been worried about is that every other country that's gone from a poor to a richer country has got manufacturing, and I don't see too much sign of manufacturing moving to Africa. Is that your experience in the deals you make?
Yeah, it's very much driven by services, infrastructure. We're not seeing a development of a manufacturing base, and of course, as China gets more expensive, as wages increase in China, it's obviously not going to be the manufacturing base for the world for too much longer. So where is that manufacturing going to be? The obvious place is Africa, but as you say, we're not seeing it.
Yeah. Why do you think that is?
I think potentially the infrastructure there's not, the mindset is not there to think long term in terms of economic terms. I think a lot of the politicians in Africa are very short term in their thinking. They're not planning for the future. And also they're not thinking about Africa as a continent. It's very narrow. They think about their country, what's happening in their country. They're not looking at how to grow intra-Africa trade, which is really going to be the driver of the future.
Do you think the regional blocks are working well? ECOWAS and the East African Community and SADC?
We don't really see that at all. I mean, as a lawyer, one would have thought there'd be huge benefits of having regulation over a region, or harmonization of laws in a region. Other than AHADA, that really hasn't happened. And so you've got all these trade barriers at border posts, which just make commerce both difficult and expensive.
Yeah. And in the longer term, of course, you have the doubling of the population from around about a billion now, to 2 billion by 2050.
Yeah.
I mean, if there's no manufacturing, how do you see that panning out? I mean, if there are no jobs.
Well, absolutely. I mean, at the moment, the unemployment rates in Africa are big as it is. That position's only going to get worse unless there's some kind of program to actually develop long-term employment for the youth. Because, I mean, as you mentioned earlier, the demographic dividend, a lot of the African population is below 30. You know, and that will only increase.
Yeah. So at this conference, I mean, I've talked to people about what sort of things they're investing in. What is your impression? What are the sectors that are the ones that people are really keen on?
I think for private equity, the sort of big theme is consumer-facing industries. So it's everything from financial services, telecoms, healthcare, retail. We're seeing a lot more real estate development. You know, you look at the skylines of Lagos, of Accra, Lusaka, Nairobi, Dar. They're all changing. We're seeing a lot of construction, which is going obviously on the back of that predicted consumer growth. Agriculture is obviously something that everyone talks about, given the huge abundance of arable land, but I think it's difficult to make money as a private equity player.
Because it's a bit long term?
It's long term, and it obviously involves, you know, farming skills. I mean, it's, you know, something which private equity players need to work with people who have those skills to be able to develop those on a long term basis.
All right. Thank you very much.